Sick and tired of hearing MAGA say "Make America Great Again"? Yeah, we are. So am I. And so welcome to The Art of Resisting. I'm Steve, your host. And first I want to say, resisting is more than just carrying a sign at a protest rally, downtown or wherever. Resisting takes many forms, whether you're resisting authoritarian government, authoritarian corporation, authoritarian whatever, your MAGA neighbor even. So standing up, defending and promoting and working towards our ideas is resisting. We've really let the Republicans and MAGA have the top voice in how our governments ran, how our societies ran for too long. No more. So, make America great again. Agree with them. Yeah, I want America better. Make America great again, better again. How? The 1950s. Yeah, let's go back to the 1950s. This was probably the most prosperous decade in American history. It's also the decade that's called the Golden Age of Capitalism. Now come on, your Republican friends, they love capitalism, right? Well, then you'd think they'd love the 50s. Yes. But the 1950s was also the decade that the rich was taxed. 90+%. Yeah, you heard me. And it worked. It worked. I mean, look at the 1950s. They're great. They're fabulous. Nobody has really anything bad to say about the 50s, except for the Republicans. You can't get them to talk about the 1950s to save your soul. They hate the 1950s. Tax the rich? Oh my gosh. That's the most horrible thing. They'll have no money, they tell us, to reinvest. We'll all be out of a job. We'll all be broke. It'll be the end of the world. Cataclysm. So if taxing the rich is so bad, how did it work so well in the 1950s? Well, let's discuss that. Let's go back to the 1950s and let's say, we'll use these numbers as an example. Let's say you made $1 million. You have a nice, prosperous business. Things are going well. Oh, but $900,000 in taxes and you only get to keep $100,000? Now, I mean, fair. Let's be fair. Nobody wants to be taxed at 90%. I sure wouldn't. So what happened is this forced the wealthy to rethink how they were going to spend their money. And what we see is that what they did is instead, let's say, they only paid themselves $200,000 instead of the whole million like they would today, because they don't pay any taxes today. That would just drop them down to the 50% tax bracket. They take home $100,000 still and only pay the government $100,000 in taxes. So what about the other $800,000? Well, what they did is they reinvested it. They reinvested it in their businesses, in the community, in society, as compared to today where they just take the money and run. And what we saw is this is where the middle class came into its own, because when they invested in their own businesses, they actually invested in us, their employees. And this is where we saw increased incomes. We saw low unemployment, low inflation. They were able to hire more people. Home ownership. This was the golden age of home ownership. The rise of white-collar jobs. Healthcare was affordable. Boy, we sure long for that. Something that had not really ever seen before, leisure time, vacations. This was new, this was novel. Take a week's vacation? Who was unheard of before the 1950s. The one thing I also want to point out, which doesn't always get a lot of attention, is research and development. You know, with that $800,000 being reinvested back then, companies could now afford R&D departments, research and development departments. We saw improved products. We saw better products, new, innovative products, safer products. I mean, this was the age where we saw televisions, appliances, cars, and everything got better, and everybody, including the rich, thrived. Now this is true trickle-down economics. Not that crap Ronnie Reagan tried to tell us was trickle-down economics. This was the real thing. The sad part about that is we had to force them. We had to tax them at 90% in order to force them to just not take all the money and run. And that's why they hate the 50s. They don't want to share. I mean, they just think of us as peasants, serfs, and slaves, and we're just labor to use. You know, so yeah, unfortunately, they have to be forced into this because they're not going to do it on their own. But here's why we have to work so hard still, is because for the last 70 years, since the 1950s, they have worked so hard to do away with all this, to get rid of it. And you can see they've kind of succeeded because, yeah, they just take the money and run, and we're left with peanuts. So, taxing the rich, despite what they say, does work. It does work. So, join the resistance. Promote this. Work for it. Let's get back to taxing the rich. Call your congressman. Beat your congressman over the head with the 1950s. Beat your MAGA neighbor over the head with the 1950s. Because we want things to be better, and taxing the rich makes things better. The 1950s prove it. So get out there and promote. So I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for listening to me and watching this video, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.